Welcome to Annals of the Irish. In this final part of the three-part series of the Great Whiskey Fire of Dublin 1875, the streets were getting more filled with people trying to escape the blaze. It was described as the poor people rushing from the burning or threatened houses, mothers with babies at their breasts, invalids tottering on some helping hand, as one newspaper reported it. Other people were there for different reasons, to see the spectacle of the blaze, while others were drawn to the strong smell of the burning whiskey. During the early stage of the blaze, people saw there was opportunity. What was it? Free whiskey. Were they man enough to go into the burning bonded warehouse? No. Whiskey was flowing through the streets. So the people who wanted free whiskey got whatever they could fill pots, jars, shoes, boots, and drank the whiskey as they liked. When Ingram, the chief of the Dublin Fire Brigade, finally arrived, the fire was already getting out of control, and he knew if this wasn't contained, it would get worse than it already was, with further damage and possible loss of life. Ingram summoned further assistance from the police and the army to help his firefighters to control the crowd. With people having a party with free whiskey and wanting to see the fire, their life was being put at risk. To the Irish Times reported on the 19th of June, half of Dublin turned out just to see the fire and free whiskey. The Dublin Metropolitan Police, like the Royal Irish Constabulary, was a colonial police administered by Dublin Castle, but the Dublin Metropolitan Police upkeep was paid partly by the city rates through the Dublin Corporation. Before the establishment of the Dublin Fire Brigade, the DMP had their own one-pump fire brigade depot stationed in Gavin Street and was available to fight fires in the city. It was suggested any fire brigade that be formed was to be under the control of the DMP, but it was denied. It was normal in other cities in Britain, but the ongoing problem was the police were to fight the fires while asked to use the pumps and work the engines. The police also had strong objections since they saw their duty as crowd control and keeping order. But their presence that night was dwarfed by the Dublin Fire Brigade. Still, the police helped to control the crowd. 150 officers and constables of A, B, and D divisions of the DMP were under the command of Assistant Commissioner Captain Talbot. In these kinds of situations, it is customary to call on the military for assistance, and on that night 300 troops in total of the 2nd and 50th Regiments of Foot, 6 Dragoons, Royal Artillery, and Army Service Corps were to take on roles in the three districts. They were under the command of Colonel Fellows, Assistant Adjutant General. While the police and troops dealt with crowd control, another operation was happening, salvaging 61 barrels of whiskey from Malone's warehouse, generally to stop any more explosions. These barrels were brought to Cork Street and were under military guard. But the crowd, seeing these 61 barrels now out of harm's way, but protected, the troops fixed the bayonets in case trouble was going to erupt. But more and more people were coming to see the commotion of the fire, and the army, plus the police, were telling the ever-increasing crowd seeing this, probably in their mind an awesome and terrifying spectacle of a fire, to get back while the firefighters are trying to do their work to control the fire. But seeing the liquid fire and people drinking it, getting drunk from it, with some seeing military protecting barrels from being looted with their bayonets ready in case if anyone tried to take it. And all of this, like never seen this type of situation before in their life, or maybe not of that caliber. This would be a sight to see, but terrifying if not contained. Other military personnel were also helping to save people's personal belongings, while an armed Royal Artillery gunner went into Watkins Brewery and saved the rest of the horses at Ardee Street. But another portion of the military was under the command of Ingram to help him keep the pumps going to try to quench the fire. But it was proven difficult, so he came up with an unconventional way of fighting the fire from spreading to the rest of the city by blocking the sewers. So no more of the fiery liquid would cause any more explosions. The troops, instructed with picks and shovels, started digging up the street along the fire whiskey path, hoping it would seep into the exposed earth. It didn't work, so Ingram came up with a different plan. And the plan was to barricade the streets with ash, manure, and tan. Ash was gathered from the back of tenements houses, but you may be wondering, what were these ashes used for? Well, the poor didn't have toilets, so it was used to make number ones and number twos. Manure was collected from carts. The reason is because carts were used for transport. This was before the automobile, which didn't come to Dublin till 1896. Dublin Corporation was in charge of collecting the manure, but that night every manure was collected, including animals. The final ingredient to stop the fire was tan, collected from tanneries. As the ash, manure, and tan being brought to Ingram, he ordered soldiers and firefighters with shovels to create a dam. It was succeeding, and with the whiskey fire getting under control, now the firefighters can deal with buildings on fire conventionally once again. Trinity students, who were part of the crowd, were asked to man the pumps, only because they were sober. Also, part of the crowd was an American rival national team who had a competition against Ireland, which Ireland lost. This American team did not take part in any kind of activity, aka drink. If you remember me mentioning before about Crown forces protecting the 61 barrels of whiskey, well, let's just say people were going to chance it going through the soldiers. But the soldiers did threaten to go amongst the crowd. But luck has it, there was a barrel unguarded, burned, but still intact. It was brought to an empty building, where one of the people found a gimlet to make a hole in the barrel. When the hole was deep enough to get to the whiskey, it was poured right out of it, that hats and whatever else they used to drink the whiskey. What might surprise you, children were also seeing the spectacle of the fire, and apparently were having the odd whiskey too. No surprise people were getting drunk from the whiskey, but what is surprising is how lucky people didn't die from the fire. But 13 were unlucky and died of alcohol poisoning. Eventually, the fire was extinguished, but the firefighters checked the burned down properties for 5 days in case the fire was to rekindle, and the detachment of the police stayed too to prevent the public from entering burned buildings to look for a rumored cask of whiskey. Speaking of burned down buildings, 40 properties were burned and were a hefty loss of business owners, except for Malone Warehouse, which was covered by insurance but only was compensated partly. The news spread like wildfire, pun intended. It was reported in Ireland for a day or two, locally just like the fire, extinguished, but the news did spread to the States as well. Some of the reports, like from the Shepherdstown Register from Virginia, the hearts of the temperance people will rejoice over the destruction of the fire at Dublin, Ireland, of the 1800 hogsheads of whiskey. The mob that surrounded the burning buildings was also glad, as it availed of the opportunity to roll out some of the barrels of whiskey and drink to its heart's content. The loss is estimated at 500,000. A whiskey famine in Ireland could be considered almost as great a calamity as the potato rot. The Grange of France mentioned a fire broke out in a warehouse in Dublin containing 1,800 puttines of whiskey. Explosion after explosion followed. The whiskey flowed into and along the street, burning and igniting other buildings, until millions of dollars worth of property was destroyed. People dipped the liquor up in pills and became so riotous that troops were called out to restore order. In Ireland, a different narrative to de-escalate and downplay the whole thing, like from the Cork Examiner, orderly, and when the opportunity afforded, offered aid rather than impediment to the police and other officers. Of course, there were, as there must ever be, some exceptions, but the exceptions in this case were astonishingly few when the vastness of the crowd is considered. The same paper mentioned there be a public meeting held by the Dublin Lord Mayor Peter Paul McSweeney in his residence, the Mansion House, County Dublin, to raise funds for the relief because of the fire. The Lord Mayor also stated how he was lucky the death toll wasn't higher. The time given for escape in some places during the progress of the fire was so short, I was apprehensive that some people would be left in danger in the garrison south of the district. But on inquiry, I was happy to learn that no life was lost during the great conflagration. But he further commented about people that died of alcohol poisoning. Any city where there was a tendency to indulge immoderately in drink. In the present case, the unfortunate victims apparently could not restrain themselves, as I understand, from the burning liquid. Now he was there, and he saw how bad the fire really was, and how bad the number of people seeing the fire and getting drunk. So he himself was too downplaying what was happening that night. But people were donating for the fun, but only one distillery owner, John Power, gave £40, while Cardinal Cullen gave 10, and Lawrence Malone, the owner of the Bonnet Warehouse, gave £30. Now, as I have said, the Cork Examiner reported of this relief fund held by the Dublin Lord Mayor. The Irish Times, on the other hand, in their own report mentions on the 22nd of June, the whiskey that was lost during the fire would give a positive effect on the market of the increased value of the remaining whiskey. But the Cork Examiner reported on the 22nd of June, Mr. Crofton, the son of a high-ranking official and himself a junior official of the Waterworks Department, instructed to use wet tan and stuff be taken from neighboring yards. Now, as I have said, tan, manure, and ashes were used to control the fire, but it was by Ingram these materials were used. But Ingram does let it be known he himself came up with it, not Crofton. And this is what he says in his reports. On arrival at the fire, I immediately gave orders that no water was to be put on. Also to have the streets dug up, sewers stopped to prevent the flow of the burning liquid, and sent for the corporation carts to bring ashes, manure, and coal to bank it up. About 1 o'clock a.m. I got to work with 4 lines of hose from standpipes, the danger of the whiskey burning on the water being over. Had the water been put on earlier, the destruction of the property would have been much greater, as the whiskey would have burned on the top of the water and go lighted into the street and the house sewers, igniting the gases in them and caused explosions. Some of the liquor escaped into Polar River and caused great explosions during the night and morning. Bonded stores, 140-foot long in Chambers Street and depth 172-foot to Cork Street. Ingram also added, Gentlemen, in addition to the foregoing, I deem it necessary to report that there is a feeling among the officers and men of your brigade, owing to reports that have appeared, that on the occasion of the late disastrous fire, that they did not take proper means of extinguishing it. I beg to state, on behalf of the officers and men, that which is a tribute to another corporation officer was done long before he arrived at the fire. I had given orders to have the fire earthed and sent for the corporation carts to convey ashes, tan, manure, and coal, and previous to there, I had the streets dug up and the sewers stopped. When the gentleman who gets the credit spoke to me at the fire, I told him I had given orders to have the fire banged up. The cost of the damage in 1875, £135,566. So what happened to Ingram after 1875? In 1882, he died of tuberculosis. He was married to Emma Thompson on the 27th of November 1866 in St. Thomas Church in Thomas Street. Emma is a daughter of Superintendent of the Derby Fire Brigade. Ingram visited the fire brigade, maybe to learn more to improve the Dublin Fire Brigade. Now, maybe while visiting the Derby Fire Brigade, himself and Emma were acquainted and got to know each other, but they might have always known each other since in the 1901 census, Emma wrote she was born in County Dublin. Whether they always knew each other or not, they had 3 kids: Catherine, born 1868, Teresa, born in 1873, while Nora, born 1875. But sadly, Nora passed away 3 months old. Then James himself in 1882, which left the estate valued at £348. But Emma, being a widow with 2 kids, also had another sad loss, since her daughter Teresa passed aged 10 years old in 1885. But all is known, Emma was living in a different address in the 1901 census, 16 Brighton Square. So where is Ingram buried? In Mount Jerome Cemetery. Sadly, it is an unmarked grave. But what is also sad is that when the new chief officer was appointed in 1938, he had records from the 1860s to the 1830s destroyed. So whatever is known about Ingram is by Last Fallen's book, the book that I have used as a source for this series. So that is all for today. See ya in the next one. Slán Inis.